I will get on with the topic that we have scheduled for today. It's about electricity transmission rights. The idea for this webinar came because we did another one, I believe, in April about the electricity market in general. And then there were quite a lot of questions afterwards that came, and the focus of that webinar was about the trading and the design of the market, the national market, and so on. So basically trading within the zone, but there were a lot of questions that came afterwards asking about, but then how cross-border trading works, and how this cross-zonal trading works, and how the capacity is allocated, and how this process is managed, and who are the responsible parties, and so on. So while this is very important, given that the European market design is some sort of a zonal market design, then when we discuss about the regional integration, the transmission rights are very important, and then dealing with the transmission rights from the process point of view, and then also from the governance point of view, is very important. Therefore, this will be basically the focus of the webinar. We'll go through the key features of electricity market design. This will be on a high-level basis, just setting the scene and starting from this point. And then we will discuss a little bit of the zonal market and cross-zonal exchanges. Then we will dive into the requirements for capacity calculation and the capacity allocation. So whenever we mention here capacity calculation and allocation, just have in mind that we are discussing about the cross-border capacity, so interconnection capacity, or as we call more and more now, we're saying cross-zonal capacity. And then we will talk about the coordinated capacity calculation, the entire capacity allocation process, and then the transmission rights itself. So what do they represent, and how they are valued, and why they are important. This is a little bit repetitive from the previous webinar, but I think it's very important to have this in mind. So when we speak about the market design, the key features of market designs are basically on how we deal with dispatch, how we deal with the balancing, and how we deal with congestion. The congestion management in most cases refers really to the zonal market and the way that capacity is allocated between these zones. So we are talking about the competition within one zone, and then a capacity that links this zone with another zone, and then how this capacity is calculated and allocated. So we will not look into the other areas such as dispatch and balancing. So the design of the market which addresses the congestion, there are on high-level basis three types of design. Is the zonal pricing, the so-called zonal market, where you have basically a zone which is composed of many different nodes of the system, of the network, and then the trading is free within the zone without any cost of network, without taking into account the cost of system operation, so the cost of the network itself, so congestion. So this is, we're talking about the wholesale trading. And then you have a model. What it means on the zonal market, it means that the TSO makes sure that electricity that is traded within the zone is delivered, and there is sufficient capacity to accommodate these flows. If there are no sufficient capacities, then TSO will take some measures, which in most cases would be the so-called redispatch measures, to ensure that they accommodate those flows, those commercial flows that are resulting from trading, and then they result into the physical flows, are accommodated in the system. In the nodal pricing or nodal market design, you have basically a consideration of the constraints between the nodes. What we have here what we had in the previous design, consideration of the congestion between the zones, we have here between the nodes. And it results that in each node, because of these constraints, you have a different price. While we had a zonal price in the zonal market, you have a nodal price for each node in the system. You might have the cases where you have the same price in both nodes. However, these represent that potentially there is no constraints between those nodes. And then you have also the hybrid model, which is a combination of the nodal system, nodal design, then also there is a system price at the end. The differences between these two is, as mentioned previously, you have basically competition and trading going within the zone, which means then it is very important to understand the importance of the cross-zonal capacity. You have high system operation costs in the zone because, as I said, TSO will need to take into account any constraint within the zone. But on the other hand, you have higher competition because there are more players able to participate in this market. And you have a phenomenon which is called the loop flows. What it means is that you have physical power flows going from one zone, so let's say zone A, to zone B, and then go back to zone A again. So this is basically the physical flows. In the nodal system, so in the zonal system, the market participants that trade on the wholesale level, they do not, of course, they do not care on the potential constraint that TSO faces on the nodes of the system, because everything is traded on the level of the zone. However, if in the design where you have a nodal pricing, then market participants will need to understand very well each node of the system and the constraints between them. This means that the TSO's costs to operate the system are lower because the prices, the wholesale prices in each node take into account these constraints. And then also from the market point of view, you have lower competition. But also then you have less or no loop flows because they are addressed in this process where you have different prices for each node. And then also in the hybrid system, basically you have a mixture of both. Now, European markets are zonal markets, and this is a little bit also because this is how it is a legacy on how the systems develop, so the country's electrification. And then you have, there are either national systems which then were interconnected to other systems, or you have national systems that were split into more national systems. There's a smiley there because in our contracting parties, the latter is more the case. So all our contracting parties, except Albania's, were part of bigger countries, and therefore also from the systems point of view, they were part of bigger zones, but then they are split into a smaller zone. And then market, so as I said, in Europe, you have zonal designs, so zonal markets. Usually these zones correspond to the political borders of countries, but there are also exceptions. Nordic markets, for example, you have different zones in the Nordic markets, which are not necessarily linked to the political borders of the countries. And then you have also Italian market, which on the top of the zonal price, so kind of a hybrid, you have also the zones within the Italian market, despite the fact that you have the system price, which represents the Italian price. And then also you have the Polish market, yet again another hybrid model. And then you have also the Ukrainian market, which is split in two zones, but this is rather a physical split, so they are not synchronously connected with each other. Now, with regards to cross-zonal capacity, in the energy community, we have the third energy package, so Electricity Regulation 714, binding. And we expect, of course, to have the Clean Energy Package, Electricity Regulation and Directive also coming in the energy community, since they are already applicable and effective in the EU. And then on the top of that, in the EU, you have the CACM, which is Capacity Allocation and Congestion Management Regulation, which deals with capacity calculation and allocation, as well as the FCA, which is not mentioned here, which deals with the forward capacity allocation, which again, we expect to have in the energy community very soon. The requirement from the third package states that TSOs shall endeavor to accept all commercial transactions, including those involving cross-border trade. So what we are saying is that in the regulation, there is a requirement that the TSO should accept all the transactions that are done on the cross-border level. Now, in reality, of course, this is not possible because the systems are not designed to accommodate all these flows. So in this case, we have a phenomenon which we basically constrains, and we refer to it as congestion. So in case there are no congestion, then of course this is the default rule. There should be no restrictions. But in case there are structural congestion, the TSOs are obliged to allocate capacity for that specific border or for all borders where the congestion appears. So as you can see, the default rule is that they should allow everything, but then the exception is that if there is congestion, the TSOs should allocate this capacity based on a market-based method. So this is the case where the exemption to the rule applies in reality more than the rule itself. So congestion should be managed, and then this management should be done on the basis of non-discriminatory and then market-based method. Now, when we speak about allocation, so again, it's a process where TSOs put capacity, interconnection capacity between two zones in the market, and then market participants buy the rights to use the capacity. Of course, everything starts with a calculation. So the TSOs will need, first of all, to calculate what is available for the market. As we said, if there are constraints, then the TSOs will need to assess the level of capacity that market participants are able to use for their commercial exchanges. And then the TSOs need to calculate capacity. They need to coordinate the capacity calculation. This is required in particular in the so-called meshed network. So where the impact of the flows from one zone to the other impact also three or more zones. So that the impact is wider than just the bilateral arrangements. And then there is a requirement that the available capacity should be set at maximum level, but always should be consistent with the safety standards. So security of supply is very important. And then the method of calculation of capacity for the market and the reliability margin. This is the margin that is kind of off the market, so the TSO keeps certain margin to ensure that for any uncertainty. And then these methodologies should be adopted by the national regulatory authorities. And then transparency in this process is very important. So it's important as the process itself. A little bit on the coordinated capacity calculation. So first of all, we need to define the geographic scope. So what is the region that is coordinating the capacity? So defining the regions, and you probably know already in EU that these regions are defined, but there is an evolutionary process. We hope that very soon we will have also the regional setup for the contracting parties, including also with the borders with EU member states, and then based on the process will be better coordinated. Then you have development of the individual grid models, which is basically the TSO will develop a grid model for the system that it operates, looking into the generation and load forecast, intermittent generation, so basically renewables, dispatchable generation, grid topology, and then operational limit for each network. There is some noise, but let's continue. And then you have then the entire, so within the coordinated region, then you have all the individual models being merged into what is called common grid model, which is then validate each individual grid model, resolves any tie lines inconsistencies, and then everything, as I said, is merged into common grid model, and then this establishes balanced net position, and then there is this process, the so-called common grid model alignment. Then from the operational security limits, the TSOs will define critical elements, define contingencies, so the N-1, N-2, or N-X criteria. So they do the security analysis based on if there is a trip of one element or even multiple trips of different elements in the network. And then also you have the remedial actions. So the measure, it's a measure that is applied by the TSOs to relieve the overloading of certain elements and to keep the security of operation and sometimes also to maximize the level of capacity available. And in terms of remedial actions, you have preventive, the so-called preventive measures, and then also the so-called curative measures. So the preventive measures will be those that the TSO engages to ensure already in advance that the certain constraints are relieved. But curative measures are something which are done near or on the real-time basis by the TSO. So basically, redispatch, for example, would be also a curative measure to relieve congestion on certain network elements. And then finally, TRM is the transmission reliability margin. So this margin is defined for two maybe elements, so are included. So one is to cover for any potential uncertainty from the point then that could occur from the point when capacity calculation happens all the way to the real-time operation, and also to allow some capacity for unintended deviations between the TSOs. And then all this will result with the available capacity for allocation in the market. This is the scheme on how the entire process of capacity allocation works. So this is a little bit also prescribed into the network, what I mentioned, SEE. So you have the forward capacity allocation, which is done mainly on the yearly basis, but it can done, yearly and monthly basis, but it can be done also in the quarterly or seasonal basis. So you have a forward explicit allocation on forward basis. And then on the day ahead and intraday, you have the implicit allocation of or market coupling. And then also you have some cross-border utilization of cross-border capacity for the balancing purpose. And the TSOs are already working in the process of how certain capacity would be allocated based on the market mechanism for balancing purpose. And then also on the real time, you really have the TSOs taking over the process and ensuring that there is a safe operation of the system. Then the value of transmission rights. So if we're talking about the value of transmission rights, this is not only for the forward rights. Indeed, it's in general for all the rights that are allocated, including also day-ahead rights. So the value of the rights represents the spread between two day-ahead markets. So if we take into account, for example, German and French market, whatever the price on the day-ahead basis is, this is considered as an index for the value the spread between these two prices is considered as an index for the value of the transmission rights. As I said, in the implicit allocation, this is basically a market coupling. The day-ahead and intraday rights, but let's focus currently on the day-ahead, are allocated in an algorithm which brings together supply and demand in one zone, as well as supply and demand on the other zone, including also the capacity, cross-border capacity available for exchanges between two zones. This is a very efficient process for allocating capacity, because then the capacity is allocated and what is considered as based on the commercially intuitive flows. So there is no risk that certain market participants would allocate capacity and would schedule flows on the direction from the high price to the low price. So the market coupling ensures that always the flows are directed from the low price zone to the high price zone. On the day-ahead basis, we still have, when we don't have a market coupling, we have explicit day-ahead allocation. And this is where market participants, of course, when they buy separately the day-ahead capacity, they try to assess what the prices on both zones will be, so that they can bid for day-ahead capacity. So this is, of course, to the extent that they have a good prediction, this can be very efficient, but we know that not in all cases they get it right, and therefore sometimes we have this flow on the opposite direction. And then the prices paid on the forward market are usually a guess or a good guess on what the day-ahead market prices are expected to be. So if we look at the forward market, let's say German again and French market, the difference of the calendar products, the difference in the prices would reflect the value of the calendar transmission rights. The monthly products would reflect the value of the monthly rights, and so on and so forth. In terms of the clarity of the transmission rights, so that was about the valuing them. In terms of the clarity, there need to be a clear and transparent procedures, starting from the capacity calculation all the way to capacity allocation. So this is very important. But in order to consider hedge certain capacities, certain rights, then these need to be these rights need to have an optionality embedded in them, and this optionality is the right of the holder to use the capacity, so schedule commercial flow from one zone to the other zone, or get paid the difference of what the capacity right owner paid in the beginning, and the index, which is, as I said, the spread between the day-ahead market. Also, it needs to be able to return the rights, but then also, if there is a curtailment, they need to be paid on the value of day-ahead market prices. This is very important. Otherwise, if the rights are curtailed by the TSOs without any compensation, then these rights do not represent a hedge for market participants, because they involve significant risks. Maybe just to make a simple example, if you have zone 1 and zone 3, so you have a price zone, you have generation in zone 1, and then you have a demand on zone 3. Let's say on the generation, you have a production cost of 30 euros per megawatt hour, and then you have a demand for the 100 megawatts capacity, and then the demand will buy at any price up to the value of lost load. So you know, as a market participant, that you have generation and loads. You know that in order the day-ahead market prices will come with volatility, and there is a lot of uncertainty of what these prices will be. So you want to make sure that you hedge this transaction. So you can wait, of course, until day-ahead market, and then sell on the day-ahead market. And then, of course, on the day-ahead market, you make profit if the price on the zone 3 is 35 euros, because your cost will be 30. But of course, you are at the risk, because the price can go also lower than 30 euro, and therefore you would make loss. But you look on the forward market, and this would be a hedge. So if the calendar price for zone 3 is, for example, 32 euros, you want to buy the transmission capacity from zone 1 to zone 3, and you're ready to pay up to 2 euros. So in this case, if you buy the capacity, you have hedged your transaction, and therefore you are safe. So if we look I looked at just a simplified real-life example. So yesterday's prices at EEX, so German and French futures, power futures. I looked at the calendar year 2021, and the price basically yesterday was 38.55 euro per megawatt hour in Germany, and 45.75 in France. So this means that if the auction was yesterday or today, the value of the transmission capacity between French and German market, the direction from German market to French market, would be around or up to 7.2 euros per megawatt hour. So this is what a market participant would be ready to bid. Of course, this is looking at it only in isolation, so only yesterday's prices. Of course, this becomes more complex when you have daily movement of the prices, and then when you put in place also the potential hedging policies and dynamic hedging and so on. In terms of the quality of the rights, okay, I've used quite a lot of time. I will quickly ramp up now. In terms of the quality of rights, you have, or what types of the transmission rights, you have the PTRs, the physical transmission rights, which have the optionality. So basically, it's the right to use or get paid for it. So meaning that you either schedule flows or get paid to it the price, the index price. And then you have the obligation, which is mandatory to use. This is not used anymore in most of the borders on the EU, but in all borders of EU, but then also not used in the energy community apart from few borders. And then you have the financial rights, financial transmission rights, which is basically the option rights, which is the right to get paid, but not the obligation. So this is very important when the value is negative, and then also the obligation, which is then very similar to the CFDs, where you have the obligation to either get paid or pay the price. So mainly the rights are issued by these rights are issued by the TSOs, but on some markets, like Nordic markets, you have them issued as market instruments, so the CFD rights. The physical transmission rights and financial transmission rights options are very similar, and with all the differences that the physical rights give you the right to use the rights, so to schedule the flows, whereas the financial rights do not give you that right at all. And very quickly now, the process itself, so you allocate the capacity, let's say on a yearly basis, a calendar product, you pay 2 euros per megawatt hour. And then as you come to the day-ahead stage, you need to nominate. So option 1, you can nominate the flow with a TSO, with 2 TSOs, or you do not nominate, so you opt for use it or sell it principle. And then if you have nominated, the capacity is blocked for that schedule, so what you have nominated. If you have not nominated, this means that you have opted for a payment. So if the day-ahead price of those rights when allocated on the day-ahead market, be it as a coupled market or or explicitly, if the value came at 3 euros per megawatt hour, you get basically 3 euros, but you have already paid, so you get 1 euro profit. or if the value of these rights on day ahead are lower, then you actually get a loss. So if it's €1 the value, then therefore you have lost €1 on megawatt hours. Whatever is not allocated on the day ahead stage then is allocated on the intraday. There is also a process of capacity calculation and all these time frames. Is calculated on the intraday, and then whatever remains goes in the balancing. On the near the delivery, all the commercial schedules become firm. So then it's the TSO that engages into potential redispatch and counter trading in case there is physical congestion. So from market participant point of view, unless there is some sort of force majeure, but from market participants point of view, by the time when the commercial schedule became firm, they don't care what happens on the real time. They consider that transaction as firm and as completed. And as said, it is the TSO's responsibility then to make sure that physically everything is settled, regardless from where the energy comes from. I have finished my part without losing time now, and at the end we will have, of course, the Q&A, which you can write already. You can start writing from now on. But I will give the floor now to the colleague from SEE CAO. SEE CAO is the allocation office in Southeast Europe, and they already allocate a lot of cross-border capacity on different borders. They would be able to, Filip would be able to give you a better introduction and also practical examples of the allocation process in SEE CAO office. Filip, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Arben. I believe now my screen is shared. Can you confirm it? Okay then.
Yeah.
Good day to everyone. It is a real pleasure to join you here today. At the beginning, I will make just a short introduction about SEE CAO, although I suppose that most of you are familiar with it, or at least I hope so. So Coordinated Auction Office in Southeast Europe is established by TSOs from the region with the aim of auctioning cross-border transmission capacities. Auctions that we perform are auctions of physical transmission rights based on NTDC approach, and that are explicit auctions on 3 time frames at the moment: yearly, monthly, and a daily time frame. We perform auctions on 7 borders covering the region from Croatia to Turkey. From this year, we have 1 new border interconnection between Montenegro and Italy. And also, I can say that with resolvement of status of cost in the upcoming period, status with SOE, we expect to increase number of borders very soon. When we are speaking about allocation of transmission rights, we have to mention the background, meaning the documents that prescribe that allocation. Those are market codes developed within the third energy package, FCA, CACM, already mentioned by Arben, and of course electricity balancing. These codes are developed with the aim to boost the harmonization on electricity markets. They actually refer to different markets, different meaning by different time periods. FCA refers to forward markets, prescribes allocation of physical transmission rights or financial transmission rights. Arben already mentioned that there are options and obligations, but I believe that it is clear that options in both ways are preferable model. FCA also prescribes explicit allocation and foresees creation of harmonized allocation rules, joint rules for allocation of transmission rights. On the other side, CACM refers to day-ahead and intraday markets and foresees implicit allocation, meaning transmission capacities on day-ahead level should be allocated jointly with electricity via power exchanges in market coupling codes. And at the end, electricity balancing network codes, it's closest to real time. It foresees exchange of balancing products on electricity market, but also foresees balancing capacity markets, which can start lots of time in advance to delivery day. These three network codes are actually guidelines, which means that they are general documents, and they foresee development of many additional documents and methodologies and so on, which makes their application a little bit more complex and time consuming. But there is also one more catch. These network codes are adopted on EU level and applied within EU member states, on inner borders between EU member states. Why I point this one? Because SEE CAO allocates capacities on borders between non-EU, mostly non-EU countries. There are also some borders between non-EU countries and member states. In EU, FCA became binding in October 2016. However, EU TSOs have conducted early implementation of FCA by creating European Harmonized Allocation rules, which started their application in January 2016. As I said, within the energy community, FCA is still not binding, but TSOs from the region have followed the best practice from EU and conducted early implementation of FCA also in Southeast Europe, which started its application in January 2018 with SEE CAO Harmonized set of rules. As you might know, this year new version of European HAR came into force. We had intention to apply to reflect that changes newest HAR version into our rules, but because of this COVID situation, it is agreed to with TSOs to postpone that process for the next year. Harmonized allocation rules, they are key derivative of FCA guidelines. They describe only forward markets. Arben already mentioned that there can be different time frames between in not only yearly and monthly, but also quarterly, weekly, and so on. In SEE CAO, currently only yearly and monthly options are performed. Also, one important thing is secondary markets prescribed by HAR, options of transfer and return, transferring transmission capacities from one market participant to another, and also possibility to offer yearly allocated capacities for resale on monthly time frame. These two possibilities are optional, while there is also use it or sell it principle, which is applied automatically, and it foresees that all non-nominated long-term transmission rights will be automatically offered for resale on a daily time frame. When mentioning significance of long-term transmission rights, we have to say that secondary markets really brought improvements and gave added value to long-term transmission rights. I'll have a few more words about it later on during my presentation. Compensation regimes in case of curtailments, and of course, security of rights, as Arben mentioned, and increased quality are also prescribed by harmonized allocations. On this slide, you can see a set of documents needed for implementation of harmonized allocation rules in SEE CAO. So besides main body of harmonized allocation rules, there are additional documents which are developed with aim to reflect all the regional specifics. Therefore, specific annex contains some derogations from original main body of the HAR. Also, there are rules for explicit daily allocation currently on force, and some additional documents such as participation agreements, financial terms, nomination rules, and information system rules. I mentioned this new border in SEE CAO from this year, border Montenegro-Italy. Currently, rules for allocation on the Italian border are enforced as separate rules, but I have to say that these rules have the same ground as our rules for other borders, and that our intention during the update of the rules planned for the next year is to integrate these rules into SEE CAO set of rules as much as possible. Products, mainly long-term products, because on explicit daily auctions, each hour is allocated separately, and basically for each hour there is a base product. On long-term level, there are 4 types of products. Basic product is the simplest one, then pro rata, which is base with reduction periods. It's again single auction with unique clearing price. Product can be divided in allocation periods. In that case, there is separate auction organized for each period with different clearing prices. This type of product can often be seen on Montenegrin borders and Bosnian. For example, sometimes it happens that we schedule allocation period with 0 offer capacity. It can look strange, but points of that allocation is possibility of resale. So traders have possibility to offer some yearly capacity on the monthly time frame, and that way to increase the offer capacity also in that period with 0 offer capacity initially. Multiple products mostly used on Greek borders. There are also separate auctions for each product, and while products cover all the time horizon. Again, different price for each product. Few words about daily allocation. Arben mentioned then CACM and implicit allocation. However, CACM is still not in force in our region. We are within the energy community, and until the application of CACM, SEE CAO will continue to perform explicit daily auctions. Once CACM is applied, transmission capacities on daily level will be allocated implicitly via power exchanges during the market coupling process. When that happens, SEE CAO could continue performing shadow explicit daily auctions as a backup process for market coupling, and also act as a distributor of congestion incomes in accordance with market spread prices. I've told that we allocate capacity on 3 time frames, yearly, monthly, and daily, but basics of the auction process itself are the same for all the three time frames. Process begins with delivery of NTC or ATC valued by TSO to SEE CAO. Prior to that process, of course, the coordinated calculation of capacities should be performed. Is performed. Arben already mentioned it. After SEE CAO receives NTC values, there are also some simple calculations that we perform to calculate offered capacities and offer it to traders on auction. During the bidding periods, auction participants submit their bids to our auction tool, and upon the gate closure, clearing algorithm evaluates all the bids and calculates the marginal price. Of course, at the end of the process, auction results are distributed to all parties, TSOs and auction participants. I said that we perform some calculations of offer capacities, and that is the part which is different for the 3 time frames. On yearly level, offer capacity is equal to yearly NTC delivered by TSO, so that's as simple as it can be. On monthly level, it gets a little more complicated. where available transmission monthly capacity is calculated as difference between monthly NTC and already allocated yearly capacity. But also things that have to be taken in consideration in this part are resale, which we mentioned, possibility for resale from yearly to monthly, and forced return. Forced return refers to capacities which are not paid in time and are taken back from the auction participant and offered again for allocation on the monthly time frame. This in practice doesn't happen very often, but for example, we had a case like this during this year. On daily level, netting procedure is applied. As I said, traders holding long-term transmission rights have to announce their intention of usage of long-term transmission rights. They have to submit long-term nomination to TSO prior to long-term nomination deadline. After that, all non-nominated long-term capacities are offered for resale on daily auctions. Also, nominations from opposite direction are taken into account, and they increase the offered capacity. So because of nominations from opposite direction, sometimes it can happen that daily offered capacity is higher than the NTC itself. Now, description of the algorithm which calculates marginal price with two simple examples. After SEE CAO publishes offered capacities and traders submit their bids during the bidding period, upon gate closure, clearing algorithm sorts all the bids by bid price in descending order and accepts one by one until all the offered capacity is allocated. In this first example, total requested capacity is lower than offered capacity, which means there is no congestion and all bids are fully accepted. In this case, marginal price is 0 and there are no incomes for TSOs. In the second example, after bids are submitted, we have a situation that requested capacity is higher than offered capacity. Bids are again sorted by bid price in descending order and accepted one by one until all the offered capacity is allocated. We can see that the first two bids are fully accepted, while the third one defines a marginal price. So that's the marginal bid, last accepted bid. Fourth bid, it has lower price than marginal price and therefore it is rejected. This is just simple example from the real operation. This is price curve from yesterday's daily auction, just for 1 hour. As you can see, same principle as on previous two examples. Bids are sorted in descending order by bid price. On horizontal axis, you can see the volume, so on vertical is the price. Every dot on the screen presents each single bid, and the red dot presents the marginal bid, the last accepted bid, and all the dots, or meaning bids which are on the left side of red dot, are accepted, and those on the right side, they have lower bid price and they are rejected. I mentioned previously that, maybe I could move camera just want to cover the slides. When I mentioned importance of secondary market and also value of long-term transmission rights, I said I will come back to it later. On these graphs, I have displayed long-term nominated capacities from one of our borders from previous month. So these are long-term nominations from May on both directions. You can see that nominated capacities, long-term capacities, volumes of nominated capacities are not high or significant. On one border direction, it is sometimes almost 20 or average between 10 and 15%. And on other opposite border direction, it is even lower. So what can we say? That traders usually don't like to nominate long-term capacities very often. But why? Why is the reason? Because they have the option of secondary market and use it or sell it principle. And what they do very often, their capacities that go for daily auctions, so allocation via use it or sell it, they go on daily auctions and buy the same capacities again. So practically, because of use it or sell it, they are buying their long-term capacities from themselves. So they reacquire the same long-term capacities. You can see, we can check the behavior on this specific border from last month, and we noticed that reacquired long-term capacities are significant. Their volume is significant. It can go up to 60%, or even in other border direction, the same trend is notable. SEE CAO does not have insights in daily nominations, so we do not know exact volumes of these daily rights which are used at the end, nominated. But we are based on this trend, we can foresee that effective usage of long-term transmission rights is significantly higher than the long-term nominations itself. And this way, traders prolong their obligation to nominate their rights. So instead nominating or by the long-term nomination deadline, they delay that nomination until the end of daily nomination. This is something that I thought you might be interesting for you. When this all lockdown started and situation with COVID, we have checked the impact on our congestion incomes, and we can compare monthly auction revenues from ongoing year 2020 with 3 to 5 year average monthly auction revenues based on availability of data in our records, because not all the borders have started allocation in SEE CAO at the same time. And what we can see that, just one more note, new border Montenegro, Italy was excluded from this calculation because there are no historical data for this border. So only the borders which were allocated in previous years were taken in consideration. What we can notice that in the first 2 months, January and February, incomes of congestion incomes were higher than in the average. And then starting from March, you can see drop, which partially coincides with involvement of COVID crisis. But here you have to take in consideration that, for example, March is allocated in advance. This was in mid of February, and also if we go on the next slide where incomes are displayed border per border, we can see that situation is not that simple, that this general match with start of crisis does not reflect each border on the same way. So on this slide we have comparison of incomes border per border, month per month. And what we can notice, for example, that this year that the incomes in this year on Montenegrin borders are mostly a lot higher than in previous years, and we relate this fact with start of operation of interconnection between Montenegro and Italy. So start of operation of this interconnection indeed increased interest of traders for other Montenegrin borders too. On the other side, what we can notice is significant drop of congestion incomes on Greek borders. and that one is notable from the beginning of the year. And of course, COVID crisis has influenced it, but we cannot say that it was the main reason. So that would be all that I prepared for today. I hope it was interesting. If you have any questions, I'm at your disposal.
Thank you very much, Filip. I will open my camera. I hope you can see me. Thank you very much, Filip, for your presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, also, dear participants. I hope that we managed to give a bit of introduction into this world of transmission rights, their importance, value, and allocation process itself. So thanks a lot for participating.